Hey everybody, welcome back. I am your host, Joe JDF Foster, and today we're going to be discussing alien style films. Basically, films dealing with aliens. Now, I ain't going to go into a big history on this one. This one was actually just a selected ones that I chose. But one thing I will get into is why do we actually make these films? And one of the reasons I believe that these films are made is to support the hopes of the idea that there is intelligent race or life on other than the humans of planet Earth. Yes, we have realized that monkeys and other animals possess intelligence, but ones that possess intelligence, such as the human race, have come under question that we haven't seemed to be able to find. Now, on other planets, we've discovered bacteria have existed, and I'll be honest, I actually do think that there is a possibility of life on other planets that could challenge the human race, or might even be smarter. And if it were true, I'd really like it to be, and really like it to actually be proven. Another reason we make these films, these type of films, is coping mechanisms with the way societies or a country is acting at the time. Um, One idea is the corruption of society. Another one is the idea that terrorism and invasions from other countries taking over societies, such as in the idea of Twilight Zone. They did The Martians are on Maple Street, or something are on Maple Street. I forget what the exact title for it is. But they did two versions of this. The original version was dealing with the Red Scare. It was dealing with McCarthyism and how dangerous it can be. They were talking about the idea that communism was coming to their country, and it was how it dealt with it. Even though in the episode it dealt with the aliens being an invasion that were going to come and take over like they did in the boys' comic book. Which is what led me to actually question what was wrong with these people in the 1950s to actually, and even though the episode is in the 60s, the comics they would be discussing would be more of a 50s style, which makes me wonder what were they actually thinking to actually believe the comics were going to happen like that. Then I remembered comics and graphic novels tend to have some basis in reality on some level in the ideas. It's the creationist's way of expressing themselves. With the second version of Maple Street that they did for the Twilight Zone, it dealt with the idea of terrorism and how terrorists were going to attack a place. They would move in, nobody'd see the difference, and then they'd form this big attack and take out the whole community. And the second version actually starred Andrew McCarthy from Weekend at Bernie's, St. Elmo's Fire, and if you saw the TV series, the second season of White Collar. But that one took on two different ideas, though it was the same episode being done. Only difference is also, spoiler alert for this, in the first one, it was really aliens testing to see how the humans would react to a situation, and seeing that it wouldn't be, whether they'd actually be willing to come to Earth or not as a good idea, and discussing how primitive Earthlings are. The second version was actually a military testing done. I still recommend watching those episodes, though, because they are both really good in the way they are done. Now, another example for this would have been Will the Real Martian Please Stand Up? Again, another Twilight Zone episode. Only in this one, a bus crashes. Well, it's discovered that there's actually been an alien sighting, and the trick is, in this episode, that there's an alien hiding among the humans. Looks just like anybody else. And nobody can tell the difference. Well, they all, again, I'm going to give a spoiler for this one as well. When it comes down to it, this man walks back into the restaurant where all these people were at the little diner, and reveals that he actually is an alien from Venus, and that they're planning to come take over the planet and control it. He reveals this to a person he thinks is actually human. Well, it turns out the one he's talking to, who works at the diner, is actually, in fact, a Martian who has been watching the Earth for a longer period of time with the planet watching Earth for the longest period of time, planning an invasion, and they know about Venus. Well, they're both planning to come and conquer it. The only question is, which one will get there first now? And that's where the episode actually ends, is on this idea. As I stated previously, another thing that they do is with society and how their countries are acting at the time, war. Again, the Martian, the Martians are due on Maple Street, or however that title is phrased in Twilight Zone. It's one of the early season episodes, actually. But what it deals with is, the original version, like I said, deals with the idea of communism coming to America, in their view. Whereas the second one dealt with terrorism in the wake of the September 11th deal, when they remodeled it. But an idea for making an alien film in general, events such as the Cold War or Vietnam or any war that's happening, as a way to protest it or a way to show the negative effects of how it reacts. H.G. Wells did War of the Worlds as a radio broadcast. And if you look it up, people honestly believed that what he did was actually happening. And they were so worried and terrified by it that it actually caused a major crisis. It actually caused a major issue in the country. And when they found out it was a hoax, a whole lot of people were mad. Given the way it was done was really well, because they did it as a radio broadcast that was actually happening in real time when he was telling the story. Well, they've made versions of the movie for War of the Worlds, and I hate to tell them, Tom Cruise is nothing. Has nothing on H.G. Wells' version of it that was done by radio. And the other versions of War of the Worlds, I don't know exactly how many have been made as versions of it and how many were actually entitled War of the Worlds, but I know there's a good number of them, and they're not as good. I actually recommend, if you can, trying to find the radio broadcast and listening to it, or actually reading the book of War of the Worlds, because it's amazing. And another reason for this is how, for making alien films, is that aliens, just like zombies and other things, are a form of the unknown. They can be seen as scary or interesting, some even comedic, but it can be done in multiple ways. Now, I'm going to discuss some films, starting with one of the earliest films that deal with aliens that I know of, The Day the Earth Stood Still, from 1951. In this film, the idea is an alien comes to Earth and tells the human race they've got two options. Either they learn to live peacefully, or his planet is going to come and destroy Earth and kill everybody. And throughout this film, we see it go back and forth on how some are trying to adapt to the idea that, hey, we're going to live well and live peacefully so that they don't get killed. Others are generally accepting the idea that we can actually get along and seeing it. And then there are some who are still resistant to the idea. thinking that it's impossible and that they should fight back. Lock Martin, who plays the robot Gort, he's this giant robot in the film, was in fact a doorman at the I'm probably going to mispronounce this, and I'm sorry if I do. The Goldman Chinese Theater, where the Hollywood Walk of Fame actually started. Mary Pickford and I forget who I think it's Douglas Fairbanks were the first two to actually do the hand printing idea. But this guy was actually a doorman there, and they picked him specifically because of his height, as he stood nearly 7 foot tall. But the problem is when they picked him, they didn't realize at first he wasn't all that strong, despite his height. And so in a lot of the scenes where you see him carrying somebody or lifting something, he's actually having to have wires help him in order to do that. And in one scene, he's actually shown, and this will be a spoiler, so I'm sorry, but I do still recommend watching the movie. It actually shows him carrying Klaatu, that alien who's come to Earth and made this demand. Well, when they do this, when they have him carrying him, they actually had to use a dolly to carry him. And they had to hide it so it couldn't be seen. But also, the suit was so heavy for this guy that he could only wear it for 30 minutes at a time before he was either getting overheated and it was wearing out his body to try and hold the weight of it. Personally, I'm surprised he lasted 30 minutes, given that it was a metal suit that they were trying to... I mean, that was basically a metal suit they were having him wear. Another thing that made the film interesting was that in order to give the ship the appearance of being realistic and looking like how cars and trucks do, they used putty around the door so that it sealed it up nicely and hid the opening for it. But when they would open the door, the putty would tear, which made it appear as if the door opened out of nowhere. In the original... Okay, now for those of you who didn't know this is actually based on a short... The movie's actually based off of a short story that has the same idea. I mean, that is the same events. Only in the original short story, Gort was actually the alien, and Klaatu was a clone or a double. People are still unsure of that, actually, and it's still arguing. That dies not too long after. I mean, it dies like any normal person would have. Whereas Gort was actually older than he looked, though we never actually see Gort's true face. Also, an interesting fact about this movie is that some of the journalists that appear in the film were actually playing themselves in the movie. And these include Gabriel Better, I'm sorry if I mispronounced the name, H.V. Kaltenborn, Drew Pearson, and Elmer Davis. I don't know these names. I've never heard of them outside of the movie, so I had to look it up to make sure. And it does turn out these people are actually real journalists during this time. Michael Rennie, who plays Klaatu, was actually chosen because he was a relatively unknown actor to American audiences. The studio head at that time, Daryl F. Zanuck, actually sent the script to Spencer Tracy, who wanted to play the role. But the producer of the film, Julian Blaustein? Again, some of these with names I'm not very good at knowing the proper way to pronounce them. So I do apologize for any incorrectness in those. Objected, stating audiences would expect more if they saw an actor of such great reputation emerging from the spaceship in this role. And they wanted to be sure that they could deliver on the expectations in the film and not have it be, oh, this film was so underwhelming or so wrong for this reason with when they expected it because of the actor, not because of the film itself. Patricia Neal, who actually plays the lead female role in this film, has admitted that she thought the film would just be another of the trashy spaceship films of that time, and had no idea that it would take off during. And this was during filming. This was during filming. Sorry, she admitted this later on, but and didn't know that during filming that it would become one of the greatest sci-fi classics of all time. She also admits that because she thought it was going to be the trashy spaceship film of another one of that time, she couldn't say her lines with a straight face a lot of the time. Which I find interesting because this movie is great in the way it's done. Now on to my second film in this list, The Little Shop of Horrors from 1960. The original Little Shop of Horrors movie, not the remake that starred Rick Moranis from 1986. There's actually an argument about this one on this first fact on this first little thing I'm about to give. According to a book, it says one thing. According to the people involved at that time, during that time, it's another. But according to the rumor, this film was made in 2.5 days on a $22,500 budget, which I actually do find surprising because this was really well done for the time it came out. Also, for you fans of the Joker from the original Batman movie and from Anger Management, fans of Jack Nicholson, this was actually a movie he starred in when he was young. In this one, he plays the sadistic dentist, masochistic patient. The dentist in this movie is absolutely horrible person, character-wise. Don't know about the actor. And in the 80s, the same character was portrayed by I want to say it's Steve Martin, but that doesn't sound right. It's the guy who did The Jerk. But anyways, the sadisticness actually is carried over when that actor portrays it in the 80s one. And what's really twisted about it is that Jack's character in this film is the masochistic patient. While the dentist enjoys delivering pain, he actually gets insulted because the patient is one who enjoys receiving pain. In the 80s version of the movie, it was portrayed by Bill Murray. In the 1960 version, it's Jack Nicholson that does the role. And the same idea occurs both times. The dentist is mean as can be, and when he finds out his patient is actually enjoying this pain he's causing, he actually kicks him out angry and calls him a freak, and I forget what the 60s version actually referred to him as. But he was insulted that the patient would actually enjoy this pain. However, later on, when Jack Nicholson's career took off, they actually featured him prominently on the home video releases in order to generate interest in the film, in order to make more sales in the home video collections and in DVDs and any other form that they had it set up off of. They had it set up in release-wise. Okay, a joke is actually made in this film, and I didn't realize it was a joke at the time. And until like the last few years when I went back and watched both films again, because they did them on a marathon night type deal. I didn't realize this was a joke that was made, and I noticed it wasn't in the I noticed it wasn't really in the '80s version the same way, but in the 1960s version, in the 1960 version, there's a joke made that the plant seeds that lead to the formation of the bulb of Audrey 2, or in this film, Audrey Jr., were found on a plantation next to a cranberry farm. Well, the reason why most people didn't get that this was a joke being made is because in 1959 there was a report that stated that cranberry crops were tainted with a herbicide which caused sales of cranberries to plummet. Well, I didn't know about this, so like most modern audiences that see the movie or saw it at that time, it went over my head even about it. Well, most from the modern audiences that saw it after the initial release, because I don't think most of them would have forgotten it. They would have probably remembered it in 1960, as it was only the year before. Charles B. Griffith, who portrayed Audrey Jr.'s voice in the film, or Audrey 2, stood off screen and provided the voice acting for it so that they could do the role and so they could do the filming. Well, it turns out his voice wasn't the one that was supposed to be used. Originally, the plan was he would do the voice during this time. And then later on, they would dub in somebody else's voice for the movie. But Griffith got so many good laughs out of it. We got so many good laughs from people. And the producer, director of the film, Roger Corman, was known for being cheap. So they kept Griffith's voice for the final cut of the film because of those reasons. Also, Shining fans, hate to tell you, this was actually Jack Nicholson's first horror movie. What's interesting is that a lot of people don't consider this to be a horror movie. They just consider it to be a sci-fi type film and nothing else. I did think of it as a horror film, but I didn't think of it I didn't know it was Jack Nicholson's first horror film until I did research on it. Okay, now next on the list from 1975, The Rocky Horror Picture Show. I covered this movie previously in horror comedies and parodies video that I did. So I'm not going to go through a long list on this one for that reason. I recommend checking out that video and my other videos because I've mentioned the Rocky Horror Picture Show multiple times actually. Even if I didn't go into details about what... Anyways, the plot for this film is that a recently engaged couple get caught in a storm one night and they come upon a manor out in the middle of nowhere that seems to be hosting a party by a bunch of weird people or strange people. I forget which way exactly it refers to them in the film. Although Barry Bostwick's character, I forget the character's name, who's recently engaged in the film, to Susan Sarandon's character, during one point in the film refers to them as during the beginning refers to them as foreigners as the reason why they seem odd. Which could be seen as a joke, but it could be offensive at the same time. But I took it as a joke because of the way it was done. Tim Curry, who plays Dr. Frankenfurter, and Meatloaf, who plays Eddie, both had prior experiences as they did the play version of the movie. They did the play on which this movie is based. Curry was in the original production of it, and Meatloaf was in, I can't remember if it's the LA or New York one. Pretty sure I discussed which one in the horror comedies and parody video. I'm not going into more detail about it. This was also the movie debut of Tim Curry, who would later go on to do movies such as It, Stephen King's It, the original movie one, where he played Pennywise. Home Alone 2, where he played a hotel manager. The movie Clue, which is the reason why he didn't want his name placed on the movie It, but instead made a special guest appearance as Pennywise, even though he played the antagonist in the film. But the movie Clue, where he plays the person who is the butler, among other things in the film apparently, that's invited everybody there to the party. That the movie Clue is actually based on the board game, but Tim Curry appears in it as the person who's hosting the party. Another interesting fact, this one I didn't mention in the other video. Eddie's corpse in the movie was a replica that they had made. Well, only 3 people actually knew that they had a corpse replica of Eddie's body in the film. Eddie was portrayed by Meatloaf. Meatloaf knew because they made the body, because they used him to make the body. To make the fake corpse. Tim Curry knew because he was and Richard O'Brien knew. They knew because they were original production type people, so they knew about this particular scene in order. But nobody else knew about this fake corpse. Well, when they do the scene and they reveal Eddie's corpse in it, the actor and actresses in the scene their look of horror and surprise are actually genuine for that reason. They really didn't know. Now, a rumor that I found, and I still haven't confirmed it. I might have discussed this one in the last film. In the last video, in the other video on horror movies and parodies. Horror comedies and parodies. I might have discussed this one, but I'm not sure. But it's an unconfirmed rumor that I found. The castle was known to have leaking problems because it was raining almost the whole time they were shooting the film. And there was only one warm room in the castle. And they filled it with space heaters, and the actors and actresses would take turns warming up. Well, this stopped. The reason it stopped, the room actually caught fire. My guess, the space heaters, as in later years, we would find out, space heaters kind of have a problem of overheating and catching fire, shorting out, and they can actually produce a gas that's actually very dangerous to people, it turns out. Now I'm going to discuss a franchise, although mine's based on the quadrilogy rather than the whole franchise entirely. I want to discuss the Alien franchise. I am not discussing Alien Prometheus. I may make mention of it, but I am not discussing the film. The 2 films, Alien Prometheus and Alien Covenant, because those are considered to be prequels, and I'm mainly focused on the Ellen Ripley saga, which is the first 4 films, the quadrilogy as I call it. And that's because there's 4 of them. In the original 1979 one, the crew received the plot is the crew of this ship receives an SOS from another ship. And once they get there, they go check things out, and they end up bringing back an egg to their ship, which contains this creature that hatches and wreaks havoc on the ship. Sigourney Weaver's big movie, according to most people, was this film. I don't know this for certain, but I'd have to agree overall that this was probably the best film that she did, despite the other ones that she's done being good as well. The chest bursting scene in this movie, which is considered iconic among many science fiction fans and fans of the Alien franchise, was done in one take using 4 cameras so that they could make sure to get the shot correctly. This one is a rumor, as I cannot find anywhere else to confirm it, but the blue laser lights that were used on the ship were actually borrowed from the band The who happened to be testing the blue laser lights for their stage show in the soundstage next door. So they were getting ready for a show, and somehow they were convinced to allow the crew to actually use these laser lights for that reason. According to the actor Kodo, I'm sorry I cannot pronounce it correctly, Kotto, Ridley Scott told him to annoy Sigourney Weaver off camera so that there would be tension between him and Sigourney Weaver when they did their roles in character. The actor would later say that he regretted this because he really liked Sigourney Weaver. This is something I found interesting. Harrison Ford, Indiana Jones, according to most people, also did the movie Blade Runner. Actually turned down the role in this movie of playing Captain Dallas. And another interesting fact about the chest bursting scene, when they did this, they had like this little thing set up. Well, without telling anyone about it, they had used real blood and guts for the scene. Well, they produced genuine shock. Apparently, it worked so well at producing such a shock that the actor, like I said, Kodo, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce it correct, Kotto, reportedly went home and locked himself in a room for several hours and didn't speak to his wife because it messed him up so badly. Another thing about this, the copywriter, Barbara Gibbs, I might have misspelled that, so I might have mispronounced the name, actually came up with the tagline for the movie, "In space, no one can hear you scream." And that I find interesting because that is the fact that they're willing to say that it was a copywriter that came up with it, means that the people weren't egotistical to say, oh, it was an actor, or to think that they were better than somebody, so they needed to do this in order for it to be right. Okay, now on to the 1986 movie Aliens, which most people want to call Aliens 2, but in fact, Aliens is the correct name for it, as Alien was the original film. The movie takes place 57 years after the events of the first film. While in the first one they hadn't colonized the moon yet, now they have. But the problem is, contact has been lost with the colony that's on the moon. And so military people are sent in along with Ellen Ripley in order to find out why they've lost contact with them and see what the situation is. One of the actors, Lance Henriksen, had privately pledged that if this film didn't work out, he would quit acting, but it turned out to be one of his most successful films in his career. Also, but this was really interesting to me, in both the standard and special edition of the film, and this will also be sorry, I froze up. This will also be a spoiler, so you might want to skip ahead a little bit if you don't want to hear this. But in the special edition and standard version of the film, the 15-minute countdown at the end of the film is actually 15 minutes long. It's one of the rare times it's one of the rare times I know of where the film actually kept the time to be realistic when they did a countdown. Because usually they do a 10-minute countdown in like 3 or 4 minutes at most, if not in a shorter span of time. Okay, now on to another note that has to do with Sigourney Weaver, in fact. Sigourney Weaver had notes for James Cameron after reading the script, which was about how she felt about Ripley should respond in certain situations. Cameron was so happy. Cameron actually was happy to accommodate her and actually praised her for not taking issue with the direction he wanted to take with the story and Ellen Ripley's character. The final note I have on this film is actually another rumor I found, as I couldn't find anywhere to confirm this. Al Matthews is a Marine sergeant in the film. Well, in real life, he served in Vietnam. And according to this rumor, he was the first black Marine to be promoted to the rank of sergeant in the field of service in Vietnam. Now, I can't confirm that because I honestly don't know, and like I said, I only found it in like one place. So now on to the 1992 film Alien 3, which I find interesting. One, the design for this movie, it says Alien, and then it's got it like with a 3 as if you're taking it to a mathematical power. And again, this proves that the film is Alien, not Aliens, like the second film was entitled. And the common misconception among a lot of movie fans that the film series is actually entitled Alien. Now, this one follows Ripley immediately after the events of the last movie ended. It follows immediately from that situation. And she ends up crash landing on a planet and finds out, to her shock, that one of the creatures has survived the problem of the last film and managed to make it to the planet as well. A rumor for this is that David Fincher was denied permission to film a crucial scene between Sigourney Weaver and the Xenomorph by the producers, but chose to ignore this, grabbed Sigourney Weaver, and shot the scene. This scene actually appears in the final cut of the film. So, in my view, if the rumor's true, then that means that the producers found out about this, and it went to editing, and they decided to keep it in because it actually worked with the film and made more sense than they thought it would. Ridley Scott actually turned down the chance to direct this film, and Rennie Harlin, who was a part of the film, would later quit because both of them thought the film should explore the origins of the Xenomorph in Alien 3 rather than being a continued story of Ellen Ripley, than being the continued story of Ripley as it was. And the people in charge of our financial people deemed it too expensive due to how special effects were done at this time. And what's interesting is Scott and Harlan would later get their wish, as Prometheus and Covenant would do exactly that. They would explain the origins of the Xenomorphs. During Alien 3, when she was off duty, Sigourney Weaver had to actually shave her head for this film. Well, when she wasn't doing her filming, she would actually wear a wig, as her 2-year-old daughter Charlotte didn't like seeing her mother bald. I found this in multiple sources, is the only reason I think this is actually real somewhat. But there's another version of this rumor that goes that the reason why she wore the wig is because it actually scared Charlotte to see her mom bald, rather than that her daughter didn't like seeing her mom bald. Personally, I think the first one's true, and the second one was just something made up by somebody else. If it, as like I said, I found this in multiple areas that stated that Charlotte didn't like seeing her mother bald, didn't like seeing Sigourney Weaver bald. So I could believe that easier than I could that in the one place that I actually found it stated that it actually scared Charlotte. But if Sigourney Weaver, you happen to see this, if you happen to see this video, I would like to hear the truth behind that rumor. I mean, behind that little fact that came up as to whether it's actually a fact or a rumor in itself. Another rumor came up that when Fincher asked Sigourney Weaver how she felt going bald for the film, she jokingly replied, "It's fine as long as I get more money." This I could actually believe Sigourney Weaver said. While, like I said, I could only find this in one place, again, I could actually believe it to have happened because Sigourney Weaver, in a lot of her films, is known for being a joking type, even when the role is serious. And to a lot of people that have done interviews that have talked about working with Sigourney Weaver, they talk about how she actually is a really funny person. So her actually saying this would make sense and be believable. Something I didn't know is that apparently this film spent over a year in editing. That is a long time to edit a film and make it work for what came out of it. And as much as most people would say that it was a great thing, I actually disagree in this case. Because I think the editing taking so long actually could have been the reason why this film seemed to have dropped in quality as compared to the prior two films. Also, apparently, because it's been a while since I've actually seen Alien and Alien 2, even though I've got the quadrilogy, as I refer to it. The first two films apparently didn't do something that this film did, in which this film, the xenomorph, or the alien, in its adult form, is actually shown to be eating its victims, rather than just killing them. Now that one, I don't remember because I haven't, like I said, it's been a while since I've watched films. I usually like to do those around Halloween, or at certain times it's like a little marathon deal, because I enjoyed them so much. Now on to the fourth film in the quadrilogy, Alien Resurrection, which came out in 1997. Only 5 years after Alien 3, which came out 6 years after the second one, as the second one came out in 1986. And the original came out in 1976. Came out in 1979. Which means it took almost a decade to get the second film. Since they put a good amount of time between each film, which to me was smart because this way fans didn't get burned out when they were waiting for the next movie and when the movies were over. And then when you announced that a new one's coming out, it would pique their interest as to how good is this one going to be. Alien Resurrection, the film is set 200 years after the events of the third film. In this one, they've cloned Ellen Ripley and made it where they've also raised the creature, the xenomorph. And in this one, they're on a ship. Basically, you take the first film and the second film, and you make a much better horror story out of it with the combined effect. Only no space colony involved. So basically, the first film with a nice new bow and and a few new twists added in that make it just as interesting in the series. Um, according to something I found, and it was found on multiple places, Ron Perlman nearly drowned during the underwater scene in this film when they were shooting it because he accidentally hit his head on a sprinkler when he was trying to surface, and it knocked him out cold, and he had to be rescued by nearby crew members. I found this in multiple areas. It's the only reason I think this might be true, but then again, it could be a rumor. Also, another thing I found interesting is that, again, if I report it as being a fact or not saying rumor beforehand, it's because I found it in multiple places that stated it. And the next one in line was that Sigourney Weaver originally declined the role of a fourth Alien film. And when they asked why she changed her mind and decided to do the film, she replied that they basically drove a dump truck up to her house full of money. Something I found really interesting about this movie is that Winona Ryder, who plays the robot in this film, and if you saw the previous two films, being an alien, being the robot in the film is not the best thing. The first one, the robot is a very, very evil person. It's basically more antagonistic than the xenomorph is. The second one tried to do a redemption idea for the robot, and I can't remember if there actually is a robot in the third one or not. I think they refer to them as androids instead of robots, though. Well, in this one, Winona Ryder takes on that role. And she's actually got an interesting idea for the character. She's actually got an interesting version of the android robot character in this film. But that wasn't the part I found interesting. The interesting part is that, again, I found it in multiple places. Is the only reason. Winona Ryder actually agreed to do this movie before she actually read the script, saying she didn't care if she died in the first scene. She wanted to do it. And it turns out the reason why she was so eager to do this movie is so she could boast to her brothers about being in an alien movie. And these are her younger brothers that she wanted to boast or brag about this to. Which, actually, to me, sounds like a traditional family idea for the most part, because one person doesn't like to brag to their sibling about something great that they did or that they got to do that would really mess, or maybe a really good way to mess with the younger sibling, to mess with their siblings. In this movie, the character of, I say Johnner, but that's probably not the right way to pronounce the name, says to Ripley, "So I hear you ran into these things before. What did you do?" The character of Ripley replies, "I died." This is actually not the end of that little back and forth. As there was another line for the character of Johnner in the film that got cut, where he actually replies to her. That is not exactly what I was hoping to hear. And that's where I'm going to end with the Alien franchise, because, again, I didn't like Prometheus, and Covenant was not that great either. And those are considered prequels and nothing to do with Ripley, so no, they're not for me. Now on to 1988, where the film They Live comes into account. This movie is about a drifter who finds a pair of sunglasses that allow a special type of sunglasses that allows him to see from where aliens have come to Earth and taken over. They take a human form. Well, these sunglasses allows him to see the true form of the aliens in the movie. This movie starred then WWF, now WWE, or World Wrestling Entertainment superstar / legend / Hall of Famer, Rowdy Roddy Piper. Again, like I stated, the special sunglasses allowed him to see the alien's true form. Piper had a line in this movie that became real famous and is often mocked or parodied in some way that states, "I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick bleep." I'm going to bleep because I really don't want this video to get mocked like that. And I'm all out of bubblegum. But it goes, "I've come here to chew bubblegum and kick A, but I'm not," sorry, I'm getting tongue-tied again. And because what I just did. "I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick A, but I'm all out of bubblegum." And I'm all out of bubblegum. Well, it turns out this line was ad-libbed by Piper. And according to John Carpenter, Piper wrote it in a notebook and was planning to use it in one of his wrestling segments. When he showed it to Carpenter, they agreed that it would be a more fitting line to be used in the particular scene that it's used in than just waiting for some moment in pro wrestling to come up with it. Also, Rowdy Roddy Piper was married at this time, and he refused to take off his wedding ring, which is why in the movie you can see him wearing a wedding ring at times. The aliens in their true form, again, this is going to be a spoiler alert, so skip ahead if you don't want to know this. The aliens resemble walking, rotting corpses. Carpenter didn't want the aliens to appear as the high-tech aliens that other sci-fi films make them out to be, but instead they decided they were corrupting humanity, so they were to look in their true forms like corruptions of human beings. Also, it's a long time since I saw the film, but a rumor that I found is that the only character who has a first and last name in the film is Holly Thompson, who is played by actress Meg Foster. Another thing about this, Carpenter is still fascinated that when this film opened in theaters, or in the box office, however you want to say it, excuse me, it opened at number 1. And another interesting fact about this, the original air date for this film was in October of 1988, but he pushed it back to November 8th of 1988. And the reason why is because Halloween 4 came out that year. What's known as the Curse of Michael Myers. Or the Return of Michael Myers. I can't remember which exactly. But it's Halloween 4, and he didn't want to compete with it. And also because of the social commentary in the film being about politics, he pushed it back to November 8th because of the elections that year. Which I think actually helped it to become a better grossing film and becoming a fan favorite over time. And another rumor I found about this film, apparently Vince McMahon, the owner of World Wrestling Entertainment, at that time told Rowdy Roddy Piper that if he didn't do this film, that he would find him another film within 4 weeks to do at the same pay rate, because he didn't want him to do this film. It doesn't state why, and I can't find anywhere else to collaborate this, so if you find it, let me know. Also, the film, another rumor I found, is that during filming, they wanted Rowdy Roddy Piper to actually make a comment about the president at the time, dealing with the idea of Reaganomics, since it was a political film, somewhat, a political social commentary. But Piper, at that time, being in the country on a green card, turned down the idea as he didn't want to get in trouble and risk being deported from the country or forced to leave in any way, or having any issues come up because of him doing what was done in the role, because of him doing it in character in a role and somebody being offended by it in some way. Now on to the next film in my order in this little. Now on to the last film I'm going to discuss in the Alien movies, Evolution from 2001. This movie starred David Duchovny. Many know him from The X-Files. Sean William Scott, who was in American Pie as Stifler, and Bulletproof Monk as Carr. I think that's how he referred to himself in it. Also did a movie with The Rock where he was looking for the Gato, which was a Jaguar-type artifact. The Rundown. That was the name of the film. But in this movie, David Duchovny plays a school teacher at a college, and it's got Sean William Scott as a guy who's trying out to be a firefighter, and David Duchovny's character is named Dr. Ira Kane. But anyways, this is the best example of a movie that dealt with the comedy version of Alien films, rather than the action and the horror and the thriller side of things. And the plot of this movie is basically a meteorite containing an alien goo falls to Earth. Well, upon hitting the Earth, the goo starts to evolve, become as the same way humans did. It goes from the goo to a single-cell organism to eventually making its way up to the Neanderthal primate stage, in which Dan Aykroyd, who plays the mayor in this, actually refers to it in the film as the fuzzy no-nose chimp. And a decision has to be made on how to deal with the situation of what's happening. A rumor I found is that David Duchovny actually turned down a role in Star Wars Episode 2, The Clone Wars, in order to do this movie. What I find interesting is that I didn't realize, well, it's not that I find it interesting, it's just more this surprised me because I didn't think Star Wars Episode 2 came out in 2001. I thought it came out later. I thought it was a 2003 film for some reason. Even though I knew that Episode 1 came out in the late 90s, early 2000. I couldn't remember if it was 99 or 2000 when it came out. My brother confirmed for me earlier that it was 1999, by the way. But Episode 2, I don't remember exactly when it came out, but apparently it came out at the same time they were doing this film. Which is why Duchovny turned down the role. Also, the clumsiness of Julianne Moore's character in the film was actually Julianne Moore's idea that they went with because they thought it actually made more sense. Wayne, who's played by Sean William Scott in the movie, does this thing during a part of it when they're dealing with like one of the many evolutions of the character. Of the alien goo, when we're taking on a multi-cell life form, it became a pterodactyl, dragon-type figure. Well, in order to try and communicate with the animal, with the creature, Wayne does this thing where he goes, ah-ah-ee-ee, tookie-tookie, and does caw-caw even. Well, a joke, I enjoy this line, mainly because during the same scene, he's told at one point, which made it really funny, that we have established that ka-ka-ka-ka and tookie-tookie do not work. Well, it turns out the ah-ah-ee-ee tookie-tookie was actually used by the bird tookie-tookie in the cartoon version of George of the Jungle. So whether Sean William Scott added this in for that, or the creator added it in as an homage to it, I'm curious to know. Also, this film revolves around the discovery of aliens, whereas Duchovny's and this film revolves around the discovery of aliens and what to do with them, whereas Duchovny's role in the X-Files as Mulder was actually trying to prove they existed in the first place. Also, there's an unused alternate ending, which shows that the character of Dr. Block, who earlier in the film, when they're technically committing a felony of breaking and entering, in order to try and get samples that they think are rightfully theirs, gets this like little dragonfly alien creature into his suit. Well, it flies into a certain region that no man would want it to. And they end up basically having to give him a very, very bad colonoscopy in order to save him from this creature. As it flies up, flies down to his leg, starts making its way back up. And it's a very funny scene. You could probably find it on YouTube. Really well done. But anyways, back to the unused alternate footage. Unused alternate ending. Actually shows that Dr. Block comes up impregnated by the alien dragonfly. Although to me, the thing they're calling a dragonfly looked more like a mosquito. Okay, and now I'm going to do the movies to watch that from this list. I'm going to do the movies to watch in the order that I think from worst to best is. Number 9 on the list, Alien 3. Like I said, I thought this film went really down in production in the franchise and was not as great as people make it out to be. Number 8, They Live. Mainly because the film's long. Or it feels like it runs on more than it needed to. Number 7, Alien Resurrection. While it was a great ending in my mind to the franchise, to what should have been the end of the franchise, it also felt like it ran a little long at times, but overall it was a good story. Number 6, Aliens. The sequel from 1986 to the original Alien. This one, it was good. It was better than Resurrection and 3, but it didn't do... but it was more about the action than the actual story being involved in it. Number 5, The Little Shop of Horrors from 1960. It's another one of those that if you can't stand black and white films, it will feel like it runs really long. I personally enjoyed it. Just, it wasn't that when I went back and watched it, it wasn't as great as I remembered it being when I was a kid. Number 4, the original Alien. Great film, greatly done, nicely done and edited. And it's actually got a really good story done to it to make it work. And it actually reminded me of the idea of Jaws in the way it was done, as you see the egg, you see the face hugger that the xenomorph begins as. You see it when it starts out, when it's the chest burster. But when it becomes the actual xenomorph, or the adult version of the creature, you hardly see it in the film. And it actually turns out to be more like Jaws in that when you do see it, it's important to the movie in that area. Number 3, Evolution. Like I said, this one was great for an alien comedy movie. But I feel like it could have had a little bit more comedy and maybe a little more action to it to actually make it work. And at times it felt like the lines were forced rather than added to make the scene work. Number 2, the Rocky Horror Picture Show. I love this film. I actually don't have anything bad to say about it at this time. And the only reason it didn't make number one in my mind is because it didn't it didn't do as much in the sci-fi tradition as the number one film did. It, to me, was what, excuse me, evolution and alien, and they live in all other, aliens and Alien Resurrection. They live, it's basically kind of what those films tried to do, but couldn't. Little Shop of Horrors did come really close, though. And even the remake in 1986 was actually more fitted to Rocky Horror Picture Show styling, in my view. Whereas the original qualifies more towards the number one film on my list, The Day the Earth Stood Still from 1951. Again, I do not recommend watching the remake because it is not as good, not even close. If you want something that feels real and the alien styling feel to it, and focuses on social commentary on society and issues that actually mattered in some ways, without actually having to say it up front, Day the Earth Stood Still, 1951 version, is your movie. I highly recommend watching it. So tell me, what's your favorite alien style movie? Leave me a answer in the comments, along with what you think an upcoming video I should do is. Like I said, if I can manage to find some way to do it, I'll consider it, and I will give you credit if I actually do use your ideas. So, like I said, feel free to leave me a comment on what you think an upcoming film should be about, upcoming video should be about, as well as what your favorite alien type movie was or is. And look forward to the next video I make. Till then, I'm out.